This is CBN NewsWatch.
Hello, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us for CBN NewsWatch for Thursday, June 18th. I'm George Thomas. President Trump's former national security advisor is going public with his story about his time in the White House, and it is creating a lot of waves in our nation's capital. In his new book that comes out next week, Mr. John Bolton criticizes the president's foreign policy decisions and fitness to be commander-in-chief. And now the Trump team is hitting back, and they are hitting back hard. CBN's Jenna Browder has the story from Washington.
The war of words between President Trump and his former national security advisor, John Bolton, is spilling over into the courts. The administration has filed a restraining order to stop the release of Bolton's new book, claiming it violates national security. In an exclusive interview with ABC's Martha Raddatz, Bolton gives a glimpse of what's inside his White House memoir.
Is the president lying?
Yes, he is. And it's not the first time either.
Bolton slamming the president, calling Trump erratic, irrational, foolish, and stunningly uninformed. And on the issue of Russia.
How would you describe Trump's relationship with Vladimir Putin?
I think Putin thinks he can play him like a fiddle. I think Putin is smart, tough. I think he sees that he's not faced with a serious adversary here. I don't think he's worried about Donald Trump.
Bolton also says Trump withheld U.S. aid from Ukraine for political reasons and suggested China's president buy more American goods to help him win the 2020 election. Trump's U.S. trade representative reacting to that claim yesterday on Capitol Hill.
Absolutely untrue. Never happened. I was there. I have no recollection of that ever happening. I don't believe it's true. I don't believe it ever happened.
The administration calls Bolton's claims bogus and is trying to block the book with a civil lawsuit. The president on Twitter. Wacko John Bolton's exceedingly tedious book is made up of lies and fake stories. A disgruntled, boring fool who only wanted to go to war. Bolton is incompetent. The administration says Bolton's book contains classified material.
I will consider every conversation with me as president highly classified. So that would mean that if he wrote a book and if the book gets out, he's broken the law.
They have to go through a clearance process before they can publish the book. And we don't believe that Bolton went through that process, hasn't completed the process, and therefore is in violation of that agreement.
A former Congressman, Trey Gowdy, questioning Bolton's motives on Fox News.
Oh, Bolton, if you really think he's unfit to be the leader of the free world, why didn't you say anything? Why do I have to buy your book to get that?
It's worth noting Bolton refused to testify in the impeachment trial, and in the book is critical of how Congress handled the process. CBN's chief political analyst, David Brody, says it comes down to a he said, she said situation.
In other words, the book is called In the Room Where It Happened. Well, John Bolton says he was in the room where it happened, but Donald Trump has a version about that as well. He was in the room where it happened, and then you've got a lot of folks within the White House saying that none of this is true. And part of the problem here for John Bolton is we don't have any actual words that Donald Trump said in the room where it happened. We have some vague generalities about what Donald Trump was talking about.
If it's not stopped by the courts, Bolton's book comes out June 23rd. In Washington, Jenna Browder, CBN News.
Thank you, Jenna. Prosecutors in Atlanta have announced 2 officers are being charged in connection with the death of Rayshard Brooks. Police body and dash cam footage from last weekend shows Brooks refusing arrest after police say he failed a sobriety test. Brooks took one of the officer's tasers and fired it while running. Former officer Garrett Rolfe shot Brooks in the back. Rolfe is now facing 11 charges, including felony murder, which carries a possible life sentence or death penalty. The other officer, Devin Brosnan, is charged with aggravated assault. Hours after the charges were announced, the Atlanta Police Department said an unusual number of officers called out sick from the late shift. In response to police-related deaths nationwide and protests, Senate Republicans outlined their police reform legislation Wednesday. They plan to bring it to the floor as soon as next week. CBN Capitol Hill correspondent Abigail Robertson has more.
Republicans hope the Justice Act will rebuild trust between communities of color and law enforcement. Its three main goals are police reform, transparency, and accountability.
Too often we're having a discussion in this nation about, are you supporting the law enforcement community or are you supporting communities of color? This is a false binary choice.
While Scott believes police officers are overwhelmingly good people, he knows firsthand, as a black man stopped by law enforcement numerous times, how much reform is needed.
We find ourselves at a place with a package that I think speaks to the families that I spoke with yesterday who lost loved ones. We hear you. I think this package speaks very clearly to the young person who's concerned when he's stopped by the law enforcement officers. We see you.
The bill calls for an end to chokeholds, increases body camera use, and sets up a national database for reporting incidents involving force.
We're serious about making a law here. This is not about trying to create partisan differences. This is about coming together and getting an outcome.
Republican Congressman Pete Stauber, a former police officer shot in the line of duty, introduced the House legislation, agreeing it's time to enact meaningful change.
As someone who swore an oath to serve and protect my community, I was devastated watching the video of George Floyd dying at the hands of a Minneapolis police officer who swore that same oath.
Meanwhile, Democrats are pushing their own reform bill, criticizing the GOP plan as heavy on gestures, light on real reform.
This is not a choice between one side of an aisle or another. It is a choice between meaningful reforms in this moment or making symbolic gestures that will do nothing to save people's lives. It's a choice between action and inaction.
The Democrats' plan goes a step further by calling for an end to no-knock warrants and qualified immunity, which protects police officers from lawsuits. Ultimately, the two sides will have to come together on a compromise bill if any of the proposed ideas are to become law. Reporting from Washington, Abigail Robertson, CBN News.
That's our Abigail Robertson reporting from Capitol Hill. Google is denying NBC's claim that it had banned conservative sites over, quote, racist protest coverage. NBC News claimed Google had banned The Federalist and Zero Hedge from Google Ads for their alleged offensive coverage of the George Floyd protests. In the report, NBC claimed The Federalist and Zero Hedge had been pushing unsubstantiated claims about the Black Lives Matter movement. Google later pushed back, claiming that The Federalist was, quote, never demonetized, and said they were only working with the site to address issues in their comments section. The Media Research Center told CBN News that this is a great example of how bad journalism and the tech world have gotten.
Journalism is pushing to demonetize conservative sites in the middle of an election year, which is clearly intended to impact the election. And Google, is working with them at least to some degree. What are you going to take? You're going to take down sites now because of their comment section? That's where ordinary people comment. And how are we to know that left-wingers aren't going on there deliberately saying provocative or offensive things?
In medical news, 10 states are now seeing a record number of new COVID-19 cases this week. Florida recorded more than 2,000 new cases Wednesday. And Texas has seen an 85% increase in cases since Memorial Day. Meanwhile, Arizona reported 2,300 cases Tuesday. Vermont is the only state that has seen at least a 50% decrease in cases. While millions have stayed at home to avoid catching the coronavirus, lingering restrictions and fear may have increased the chance of dying from cancer for some. CBN's medical reporter Lori Johnson explains why.
New data shows a staggering 90% of cancer screenings were canceled this year because of COVID-19 stay-at-home orders. Hundreds of thousands of Americans missed the tests that can detect cancers of the colon, breast, cervix, and more, often before the patient even has any symptoms.
Over time, cancer grows and can spread throughout the body. That's why early detection and treatment improves the patient's chance of survival. Missed or delayed screenings could prove catastrophic.
That ends up delaying their opportunity, if they are going to be diagnosed with cancer, to have the benefits of that early detection. And so my sense is that there will be more severe cancer diagnoses.
Now that many COVID restrictions are easing and patients can get the screenings and other checkups, ongoing fear is a problem. Some worry about catching the virus at the doctor's office or hospital, although healthcare facilities take steps to minimize that risk by requiring masks, clean hands, fewer people in waiting rooms, and more.
I would love to be able to see churches really stepping up to the plate, encouraging people to be able to go and get their regular cancer screening done.
Needed to be able to have folks that were walking with them through this.
Karen Tripp leads a nationwide ministry of church volunteers trained to help cancer patients draw closer to Christ. She expects a spike in the months to come.
There's going to be a lot of people that we know in our communities that are going to be coping with cancer that are going to need to see how Christ can help them through that. When we look at the studies, there's no question that the impact of faith on a person's physical health is enormous.
Turns out it's not just cancer screenings. A new survey shows nearly half of all Americans report they or a family member skipped or delayed other medical and dental care because of the pandemic. And as a result, 1 in 10 of them say that person's condition worsened. Lori Johnson, CBN News.
Coming up, leveling the playing field. These girls are fed up with being forced to compete with boys. They're losing in sporting events. Can they win in the courtroom?
To have sex before you marry is a bad idea.
Don't tell me there's no such thing as gun violence.
That just depends on your definition of when life begins.
Watch Dan and Dale tackle trending topics that test your faith on the next Faith Wire, Monday night at 9:30. The Global Lane takes you around the world, providing facts over fiction.
What might rising trade and geopolitical tensions mean for you on the home front?
With over 45 years of experience, award-winning journalist Gary Lane brings you the truth from a global angle.
What about the issue of immigration?
World news analysis you won't see anywhere else.
And it's all right here on the Global Lane.
Watch The Global Lane, Thursday night at 9:30.
Welcome back to the broadcast. Just imagine how a female athlete feels when suddenly she has to compete with transgender athletes. Well, that is what happened to Chelsea Mitchell, and it cost her 4 state championships. Chelsea was fed up, so now she and other female athletes in Connecticut are fighting back with a federal lawsuit. Caitlin Burke has the story.
The first time I competed against a transgender athlete was in my freshman year at the state open meet. And it was really just it was confusing.
That confusion grew into frustration as Chelsea Mitchell had to compete against biological males her entire high school track career. Now a graduating senior, she's come up short in 4 state championship events.
There's been a lot of feelings, whenever I race against these biological males that no matter how hard I try, I'm not going to win, and we line up knowing we're going to lose.
It seems like a no-brainer,
Biological males compete against biological males. Biological females compete against biological females. But several years ago, the CIAC, or the Connecticut Interscholastic Athletic Conference, adopted a policy that allows anyone who identifies as female to compete in girls' athletic events. After years with this as the reality, Mitchell and 2 other athletes are fighting back.
I'm hoping for my sport to be fair again because it's something that we all love to do. And when it's not fair, it's not as fun because you know that all your hard work isn't really paying off.
Alana Smith joined Chelsea and a third athlete, Selena Sewell, to take action. Represented by Alliance Defending Freedom, they filed a complaint with the Education Department's Office for Civil Rights. They received a decision in their favor that allowing transgender females to compete in girls' sports is illegal. The 3 also filed a federal lawsuit challenging their state's policy. Their attorney argues that forcing girls to become spectators in their own sports completely goes against Title IX, the 1972 federal law creating equal opportunities for women.
Athletic policies like the ones that we're seeing in the state of Connecticut really violate Title IX and undermine nearly 50 years of advances for women. We essentially have male sports and co-ed sports in the state of Connecticut.
The Justice Department recently joined the discussion, filing a statement of interest in the case, underscoring that Title IX protects on the basis of biological sex.
We all know both from science and common sense that males are generally bigger, faster, and stronger than comparably fit and trained female athletes.
Connecticut's athletic body says its policy complies with a state law barring schools from discriminating against transgender students. Lawyers for the 2 transgender athletes at the center of this case argue since both of their clients are undergoing hormone treatments, it puts them on a level playing field with those they compete against.
No amount of cross-sex hormones or hormone blockers and things of that nature can really undo the physiological advantages that biological males have, whether that's in their larger hearts and lung capacity and denser bones and stronger muscles.
Connecticut, 17 other states, and the District of Columbia allow transgender high school athletes to compete without restrictions. Idaho recently became the first state to ban transgender athletes from competing in women's sports. The ACLU quickly sued, challenging that legislation. ADF attorneys are working to get that lawsuit dismissed. Meanwhile, back in Connecticut, just before COVID brought an early end to the spring track season, Chelsea won the state championship in the 55-meter dash, defeating a transgender competitor.
To kind of be in the same race as the athlete who has beaten me so many times and took those titles away from me, to be able to finally win was just an amazing feeling.
Her attorney, however, stresses this does not make up for the unfairness faced by Chelsea and other female athletes over the last 4 years.
It also, too, doesn't undo the fact that even though Chelsea might have won, there are a number of other young female athletes who placed beneath the biological male in those placements, and they were bumped down to positions they didn't deserve.
When these 3 athletes and their families decided to come forward and fight, they expected pushback. Chelsea's mom, Christy, says they've actually seen the opposite.
Other parents have been just very supportive and grateful. Often they will come up to us at meets and thank us for having spoken out. So a lot of people are worried to speak out. They're worried about backlash or that, they will be judged by taking this stand. And we haven't had that.
The federal lawsuit remains in the early stages, but ADF is hopeful. They're requesting that transgender athletes be banned from competing in girls' sports in Connecticut and that all records set by them be erased. Caitlin Burke, CBN News, New Haven, Connecticut.
Still ahead, the movement to delete anything that someone thinks is offensive is censoring books, movies, and destroying careers. But is America overreacting? We answer that question and more next.
on the home front.
Thanks for joining us for CBN's On the Home Front, where we highlight what the men and women of America's military do to defend our country. CBN honors the men and women in our military with an initiative called Helping the Home Front. It partners with churches across the country to meet the needs of their military families, from repairing homes to wiping out medical bills for wounded veterans.
On the Home Front, Tuesday morning at 10:30.
If you want to be an attorney with a passion for serving people and for excellence, Regent University needs to be high on your list.
Regent's award-winning law school doesn't just create lawyers. We create leaders, judges, prosecutors and defense lawyers, civil litigators, and leaders in government.
My focus has been trying to really make sure we have the future leaders we need for the bench and the bar and for society generally.
You'll learn from highly credentialed leaders who are current and former judges, distinguished scholars, and ACLJ counsel.
I'm so glad I chose Regent. The relationships here have been amazing. The faculty have been amazing. Not everybody's called to the same thing when they leave law school, but they're called by a God who has a purpose for their lives, and He is going to use that education to make a difference in the world.
Regent will prepare you to be a purpose-driven, practice-ready lawyer. To start your rewarding law career, complete the online application, submit your transcripts, and take the law school admissions test by July. Apply today.
Welcome back to the broadcast. Defunding police, autonomous zones, police shows cancelled, Gone with the Wind edited, Elmer Fudd's gun removed, Confederate statues dismantled or destroyed. Is America overreacting to changes demanded in the aftermath of the George Floyd incident? Appearing on this week's episode of The Global Lane, author and speaker Alex McFarland is unsurprised by America's cultural shift.
2020 is going to be the year that we remember there was a cultural shift in America that, apart from the intervention of God, was paving the way for the overthrow of America. It's very sad. We've lost our moral compass, and we're losing our ability to think rationally. And all of these changes in what they call cancel culture, cancel this, discontinue that, pull down statues, rewrite history. It's not going to change anything until there's a change in the human heart. For one thing, obviously we know the main change in the human heart is when people have a relationship with Jesus Christ, and that's the fundamental change all people need. But one part of the human heart that our founders knew about, but people seem to ignore today, is a moral compass. And teaching young people that the way to get what you want is to throw a tantrum and smash windows, and you make enough noise and anarchy till you get your way. That's not the right message to send to our culture. The message is that there is moral truth, and we're to live morally. And so, Gary, I'm deeply concerned that we're a culture descending further and further into lawlessness.
And Alex, a lot of people of faith are actually going along with some of these demands for change beyond equality and justice. So how should Christians respond without coming across as being insensitive and uncaring?
Well, you're right. When we talk about people of faith, we talk about the body of Christ, Christians, and then within the body of Christ, there are ministers and people in positions of leadership. And I've got to say, and by God's grace, I've, in the last 30 years, pastored 2 churches, spoken in 2,200 churches. I'm very concerned that most pastors are not speaking to their flock about moral and social and political issues from a biblical perspective. The Barna Research Group shows that 74% of adult parishioners want their clergy or their priests to speak about moral and political and social issues from a biblical perspective, but most aren't. Only 12% of pastors do. And so a lot of people, especially young people, are not really grounded on how to speak truth and know truth and think critically, think biblically, because the clergy are not feeding the flock. And so I'll grant you, as a pastor, sometimes it's a little uncomfortable to talk about sin, righteousness, repentance, abortion, biblical morality, the sin of homosexuality. and really how transgenderism and gender confusion is demonic. I mean, these are hard things to preach on, but look, if we, the pastors and the clergy and the body of Christ, if we don't tell this world what thus saith the Lord, our nation's just going to further unravel, maybe past the point of no return.
Well, I guess it begins there, does it not? Alex McFarland, we're out of time. Author, speaker, educator, thank you for joining us.
God bless you.
You can watch more of The Global Lane tonight at 9:30 Eastern right here on the CBN News Channel. Well, folks, we'll be back with more of NewsWatch right after this.
If you want to be an attorney with a passion for serving people and for excellence, Regent University needs to be high on your list.
Regent's award-winning law school doesn't just create lawyers. We create leaders, judges, prosecutors and defense lawyers, civil litigators, and leaders in government. Ready to become a purpose-driven, practice-ready lawyer? To start your rewarding career, complete the online application, submit your transcripts, and take the law school admissions test by July.
Nutrition, exercise, essential oils, weight loss, and more. It's Healthy Living with Lori Johnson.
Talk about what's in this.
Join CBN health reporter Lori Johnson to get the latest information from today's top health experts.
This is fantastic.
Find out what you need to know to live a healthier life. Watch Healthy Living, Tuesday night at 9:30.
Woohoo! Hi, Superbook fans. Here's something else you'll love. It's the new Superbook Bible app. It's packed with games, activities, and Superbook episodes that you can watch for free. Oh no! There's trivia, a fun daily devotional, and answers to your Bible questions. Plus, an easy-to-understand Bible the whole family will enjoy. You can even create your own Superbook character. Ta-da! Whoa!
No Super Falls, man.
Come.
Sorry, pardon me. Sorry, excuse me. Ouch!
Are you getting this?
Earn super points to win daily prizes too, and so much more. Time to get back to my adventures. See you soon. It's the new Superbook Bible app. Free downloads on iTunes, Google Play, and Amazon.
Senior citizens living in nursing homes have endured major isolation since the coronavirus pandemic began. So a nursing home co-worker in Concord, New Hampshire, decided to do something about it. Rich Vandervet created a pen pal program for residents at the Sullivan County Healthcare and Somerset Senior Home. News outlets, they caught wind of the program, and now senior citizens are receiving letters from all over the country, 700 letters to be precise. Vandervet said his initial goal was to build a bridge between two lonely populations. Well, folks, that is it for this edition of CBN NewsWatch. I hope you will join us again next time. From all of us here from the Christian Broadcasting Network, have a great day. Goodbye and God bless.